gärna upp en shelter. Just up in something.
Yeah, they're probably not.
Remoto 4. Tiene remoto 4. Sí, ¿cómo está?
I know, man.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Responders going to be right over there in the corner.
Yeah, I have no problem. They gotta break up. I'll talk to you. I'm gonna try one.
Yes, sir.
I sure can. Okay, sounds good. And this is on camera, right? Okay. Bill Sandra, the youngest victim.
One,
of Dana
two,
Falkenberg, was
check.
3 years old on board American Airlines Flight 77 when it crashed into the Pentagon. She'll be 20 years old today.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us for the annual September 11th observance at the Pentagon. The Pentagon community comes together every year on this day to honor and remember the men and women who were taken from us 17 years ago on September 11, 2001. The United States Army Band Brass Quintet, under the direction of Sergeant Major Terry Bingham, will perform a prelude concert.
Good volume. So Bill Sandra, the youngest victim, Dana Falkenberg was just, that's great. I'm glad. I didn't know if everybody would hear this. after the show, I feel like this shit will quickly get a little stale. People have already seen some of the stuff. But we'll figure it out.
Go with that.
I sure can. Loud and clear. What's that? Okay. Gotcha. Sure. Great.
Our, the guy who was at the Millennium.
You're safe there, we'll try.
The guy who was at the Millennium stage. Where? Arlington Cemetery.
You might have to move over to the camera. That means toss back. And by the way, if they start reading the names, I'm just going to toss back right away to you guys and say the victims' families are standing behind me. Does that work? You okay with that? Do you know who's tossing to me if we do this? This is good. Tell them. Send the youngest victim.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United States Department of Defense, we welcome you to the annual September 11th observance to honor and remember the 184 lives lost on American Airlines Flight 77 and at the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael L. Rhodes, Director of Administration.
Well, to the Pentagon community and the Pentagon family that's here, and all those who are joining us by broadcast, we welcome you. We welcome you to our 9/11 memorial and today's Pentagon September 11th ceremony. We're here together, families and friends of those we so tragically lost here 17 years ago, building survivors, the first responders who raced to danger to help, those from here at the Pentagon, those in our local partners, our state partners, and other federal agencies, all the first responders who came to the call, and all our other Pentagon personnel and federal family. We will forever be a Pentagon family, bonded, as is the nation, by that tragic day 17 years ago, bonded by our actions since then, and bonded by our continued gathering here each year. Today, as we come together, united at this site to remember those we lost, fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, friends, and co-workers. As we remember them, we know that they still live on in our hearts, and we will strive every day to honor them with the lives that we lead. We remember, and we reflect upon and renew our faith and our commitment to all that is good in this nation. Again, thank you for joining us today, and now we will proceed with the reading of the names.
Please remain silent and silence all mobile devices as the names of those who were killed 17 years ago are remembered.
Dr. Paul W. Ambrose. Specialist Craig S. Amdusen, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Melissa Rose Barnes, United States Navy. Master Sergeant Max J. Belkey, United States Army, retired. Dr. Yenitz B. True. Petty Officer 2nd Class Chris Romeo Bishutat, United States Navy. Carrie R. Blackburn. Colonel Canfield D. Boone, United States Army. Mary Jane Booth. Donna M. Bowman. Alan P. Boyle. Bernard C. Brown II. Petty Officer 3rd Class Christopher L. Burnford, United States Navy. Captain Charles F. Burlingame III, United States Navy Reserve, retired. Petty Officer 3rd Class Daniel M. Calderono, United States Navy. Sergeant 1st Class Jose O. Calderon Amendo, United States Army.
Suzanne M. Calley. Angeline C. Carter. Sharon A. Carver. William E. Caswell. Sergeant 1st Class John C. Chetta, United States Army, retired. Rosa Maria Chapa. David M. Charleboy. Sarah M. Clark. Julian T. Cooper. Asia S. Cottom. Lieutenant Commander Eric A. Cranford, United States Navy. Ada M. Davis. James D. Debonair. Captain Gerald F. DeCanto, United States Navy. Rodney Dickens. Lieutenant Colonel Jerry D. Dickerson, United States Army. Eddie A. Dillard. Petty Officer 1st Class Johnny Doctor Jr., United States Navy.
Captain Robert E. Dolan, Jr., United States Navy. Commander William H. Donovan, United States Navy. Lieutenant Commander Charles H. Rose III, United States Navy, retired. Commander Patrick Dunn, USN. Petty Officer 1st Class Edward T. Earhart, USN. Barbara G. Edwards. Lieutenant Commander Robert R. Elsey, United States Navy Reserve. Charles S. Falkenberg. And his wife, Leslie A. Whittington. And their 2 children, Dana Flackenberg and Zoe Flackenberg. Petty Officer 3rd Class Jamie L. Fallon, United States Navy. J. Joseph Ferguson. Amelia V. Fields. Gerald P. Fisher. Darlene E. Flagg. And her husband, Rear Admiral Wilson F. Flagg, United States Navy Reserve, retired.
Petty Officer Second Class Matthew M. Flacco, United States Navy. Sandra N. Foster. First Lieutenant Richard P. Gabriel, United States Marine Corps, retired. Captain Lawrence D. Getzfred, USN. Cortez Gee. Brenda C. Gibson. Colonel Ronald F. Golinsky, United States Army, retired. Ian J. Gray. Diane Hale McKenzie. Stanley R. Hall. Carolyn B. Hammond. Michelle M. Heidenberger. Sheila M.S. Hine. Petty Officer First Class Ronald J. Hemingway, United States Navy. Major Wallace Cole Hogan, Jr., United States Army. Staff Sergeant Jimmy I. Holly, United States Army, retired.
Angela M. Hout. Brady K. Howell. Peggy M. Hurt. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen N. Highland, Jr., United States Army. Lieutenant Colonel Robert J. Heimel, United States Air Force, retired. Sergeant Major Lacey B. Ivory, United States Army. Brian C. Jack. Stephen D. Jacoby. Lieutenant Colonel Dennis M. Johnson, United States Army. Judith L. Jones. Ann C. Judge. Brenda Kegler. Chandler R. Kelly. Yvonne E. Kennedy. Norma Cruz Kahn. Karen Ann Kincaid. Lieutenant Michael S. Lemon, United States Navy. David W. Lachek.
Dong Chol Lee. Jennifer Lewis. And her husband, Kenneth E. Lewis. Samantha L. Lightborn Allen. Major Stephen V. Long, United States Army. James T. Lynch, Jr. Terrence M. Lynch. Petty Officer Second Class Nehaman Lyons IV, United States Navy. Shelley A. Marshall. Teresa M. Martin. Ada L. Mason Acker. Lieutenant Colonel Dean E. Matson, United States Army. Lieutenant General Timothy J. Maud, United States Army. Robert J. Maxwell. Renee A. May. Molly L. McKenzie. Dora Marie Machaca.
Patricia E. McKinley. Major Ronald D. Milam, United States Army. Gerald P. Morin, Jr. Odessa V. Morris. Petty Officer First Class Brian A. Moss, United States Navy. Teddington H. Moy. Lieutenant Commander Patrick J. Murphy, United States Navy Reserve. Christopher C. Newton. Can Win. Petty Officer Second Class Michael A. Noath, United States Navy. Barbara K. Olson. Ruben S. Arendo. Diane B. Pedro. Lieutenant Jonas M. Panic, United States Navy Reserve. Major Clifford L. Patterson, Jr., United States Army. Robert Pettinger. Robert R. Ploger III. And his wife, Zandra F. Ploger.
Lieutenant Darren H. Pontel, United States Navy Reserve. Scott Powell. Captain Jack D. Punches, United States Navy, retired. Petty Officer First Class Joseph J. Pisier, Jr., United States Navy. Lisa J. Rains. Deborah A. Ramser. Rhonda Sue Ramsusen. Petty Officer First Class Marcia D. Ratchford, United States Navy. Martha M. Reski. Todd H. Rubin. Cecilia E. Lawson Richard. Edward V. Rowenhorst. Judy Rowlett. Sergeant Major Robert E. Russell, United States Army, retired. Chief Warrant Officer William R. Ruth, United States Army Reserve. Charles E. Sabin, Sr. Marjorie C. Salamoni.
John P. Sammartino. Colonel David M. Scales, United States Army. Commander Robert A. Schengal, United States Navy. Janice M. Scott. Lieutenant Colonel Michael L. Sleeves, United States Army, retired. Marian H. Serva. Commander Dan F. Schoenber, United States Navy. Anita M. Sherman. Diane M. Simmons. And her husband, George W. Wilson. Donald D. Simmons. Cheryl D. Sincock, Chief Greg H. Smallwood, United States Navy. Lieutenant Colonel Gary F. Smith, United States Army, Reserved. Marie Soper. Robert Spiesman. Patricia J. Stalls.
Edna L. Stevens. Norma Lang Sturley. Sergeant Major Larry L. Strickland, United States Army. Hilda E. Taylor. Lieutenant Colonel Kip P. Taylor, United States Army. Leonard E. Taylor. Sandra C. Taylor. Sandra D. Teague. Lieutenant Carl W. Teepee, United States Army, retired. Sergeant Tamara C. Thurman, United States Army. Lieutenant Commander Otis V. Tolbert, United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Willie Q. United States Navy Reserve. Lieutenant Colonel Karen J. Wagner, United States Army. Meta L. Fuller. Specialist Chin Soon Pak Wells, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Madeline A. White, United States Army. Sandra L. White.
Ernest M. Wilshire. Lieutenant Commander David L. Williams, United States Navy. Major Dwayne Williams, United States Army. Chief Marvin Roger Woods, United States Navy, retired. Captain John D. Yamnicki, Senior, United States Navy, retired. Vicky Yancey. Petty Officer Second Class, Kevin W. Yoakum, United States Navy. Chief Donald M. Young, United States Navy. Edmund G. Young, Jr. Lisa L. Young. Shuan Young. And her husband, Yu Gang Jun.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain silent for the arrival of the official party, the national anthem performed by the United States Naval Academy Glee Club. A moment of silence to honor those killed at the Pentagon, on United Airlines Flight 93 and in New York, and the invocation delivered by Chaplain Major General Paul Hurley, Army Chief of Chaplains. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Paul Silva. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of Defense, James N. Mattis. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, Michael R. Pence, and the Second Lady of the United States, Mrs. Karen Pence.
Please join me in respect for our fallen brothers and sisters in a moment of silence. And let us now listen to these sacred words that we recall at this sacred moment. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Almighty God, source of all that is good, we give you thanks for your abundant mercy. We give you thanks for your healing presence. As we gather here today, keep us always mindful of lives lost and of the heroism of all our uniformed service personnel and every citizen. I ask that you strengthen our resolve to reflect more fully on these great, heroic examples of selfless service in our lives today. Bless this observance. And may we always remember that sacrifice in the cause of freedom is never in vain. It conquers all. It tramples every evil force. Grant peace to those we have lost in this conflict against evil, and give renewed strength to those who continue the fight, wherever it may be found. And we ask all this in your holy and sovereign name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Paul Silva.
Good morning. Please let me begin by offering a heartfelt welcome to the families and friends of those who lost their lives in this place on that day. Mr. Vice President, Your Royal Highness, Mr. Secretary, distinguished guests, and most of all, friends and family of survivors of the fallen, good morning. Today we remember and honor those who were taken from us too soon on that fateful morning. The 125 service members and civilians working in the Pentagon, the 59 men and women and children who flew on Flight 77, and those who perished in New York and Pennsylvania. None of them anticipated an attack on our nation that day, but as we gather here 17 years later, we know that September 11th, 2001 will always stand apart from other days. It is a day that our nation and our families will never forget. On that day, terrorists attacked this nation because of what we believe in. And the innocents that died that day died because of what they represented: freedom and liberty. These ceremonies today across our country inspire us to reflect not only on the nation's strength and resolve after those brutal attacks, but also on the strength and resilience of individual people who continue to carry on, even to thrive in spite of the pain of losing a loved one. We should also take comfort in knowing that those who died imparted a legacy of selfless service, of courage and patriotism, and a belief in the high ideals, all of which continue to inspire a new generation of grateful Americans who have answered the call to serve. The 2 million soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who wear the uniform of this nation today carry the spirit and the legacy, that legacy inside of them as they serve courageously and selflessly around the world. In fact, the majority of those men and women in uniform joined after 9/11. Most of them joined because of 9/11. They volunteered during a time of war to defend our country because they believe in what we stand for as a nation, and they live by the example set by those who we honor here today. So today, let us reaffirm the commitment that as long as we have breath to breathe, our military members will defend this nation. We will ensure that future generations of America are able to enjoy the same freedoms and liberties that we inherited. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you our Secretary of Defense, the Honorable James Mattis.
Well, thank you, General Silva, Mr. Vice President, Mrs. Pence, Your Royal Highness, cabinet officials. Welcome to all of you here on this sacred ground. And to our first responders who join us here today, thank you. To our most honored guests, the families of those we lost 17 Septembers ago, let me say to you that here in the shadow of our rebuilt Pentagon, we are all part of your larger family. We stand with you every day in honored tribute of the fallen of your loved ones. In that spirit, this morning, we commit ourselves to remembering and honoring the lives that might have been. We keep faith with the innocent who perished. We take solace in their deaths were not in vain, for in their passing, they empowered us forever with our enduring sense of purpose. And we remember that hatred, disguised in false religious garb to murder innocents, will not prevail. Though evil visited us on a cloudless Tuesday morning, courage and strength answered amid the fire and smoke in New York City, over a Pennsylvania meadow, and in this very building, as innocent people from 91 countries were murdered on our soil, many of those countries represented by the foreign dignitaries who join us here today. We remember the bravery and sacrifice of those who fell here in America and then on far-flung battlefields. We salute the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen, and Marines who nailed our colors to the mast, giving their last full measure of devotion, declaring proudly that Americans do not scare. And we followed to the end of the earth those who sought to break our spirit. Together with the families of the fallen, we remember all that is good, all that is true, and all that is beautiful about those we have lost. And if we remember them, if we honor them by living as they would have us live, if we in the Department of Defense do our best every day to protect America's promise to the world, then we keep our promise to them and to ourselves and to future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege to introduce the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Pence.
Secretary Mattis, General Selva, Your Royal Highness, members of the Cabinet, distinguished members of Congress, members of our armed forces, including the 3rd Infantry Old Guard, who distinguished themselves on this day 17 years ago. Honored guests, fellow Americans, Pentagon personnel, first responders, and most especially to the family members of those who left this life on these grounds 17 years ago today. It is deeply humbling for Karen and me to join you here at this National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial for the 2018 observance, fulfilling a promise engraved on the gateway of this hallowed ground that we will never forget what took place in this place on that fateful morning. President Trump asked me to join you for this ceremony to pay a debt of honor and remembrance to all who fell here at the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, and to express the gratitude of the American people for all who have labored every day between then and now to rebuild, to re-strengthen, and to protect this nation. The Bible tells us that we're to mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. Today, as a nation, we pause to do just that. The President and the First Lady are gathered at this hour by a quiet field in Pennsylvania. In New York City, thousands gathered at Ground Zero to ring the bell and recite the names. And here, on the banks of the Potomac, we meet again in this place, where the names of our beloved fallen are recited, where they're carved into steel and granite benches across these hallowed grounds, and will be remembered forever in the hearts of the American people. 17 years ago today, America fell under attack. 19 radical Islamic terrorists seized control of 4 commercial airlines to strike the centers of our economy, our military, and our national government. They struck the World Trade Center first. At 8:46 in the morning, the hijackers hit the North Tower. Then, 17 minutes later, as the world watched, the aircraft struck the South Tower. At 9:28, a third group of terrorists hijacked Flight 93 in the skies above Pennsylvania and redirected the aircraft toward Washington, only to be stopped by the extraordinary heroism of the Americans on that aircraft. Here at the Pentagon at 9:37, terrorists struck this great citadel of American strength. The attacks on September 11th shattered the peace of that quiet September morning and claimed the lives of 2,977 men, women, and children. 184 of them fell here. 59 aboard Flight 77 and 125 dedicated Americans serving in the hallways of the Pentagon and our Department of Defense. As the families here know, they were mothers and fathers to be, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. They were family. They were senior citizens and first-generation citizens, doctors and engineers, a Sunday school teacher, and a Little League coach. They were young professionals with new careers, and they were little children, just finding their way in the world. They were recent recruits and decorated veterans, patriots all. Among them were a mom and dad and their two daughters, the Falkenbergs, who had just celebrated the 3rd birthday of their youngest, Dana, earlier that summer. A 6th grade teacher, Sarah Clark, chaperoning 3 students on a school trip from California. Her fiance will never forget those last 3 words he heard. I love you. There was a budget analyst for the Army, Odessa Morris, who volunteered her time and skill to serve her community as a financial counselor and a treasurer at her church. And an Air Force veteran, Jim Lynch, who was known by his neighbors for the American flag, always flying atop that 15-foot flagpole that stood in his front yard. To the families of the fallen, gathered here and all those looking on, the cherished final moments you shared with your loved ones no doubt seem like just yesterday. A goodbye kiss, a tender embrace, or one last wave. Just know that your nation understands that while we all suffered loss that day, we know you bear a special burden. But we gather here in the shadow of the building where your loved ones departed this life to say that you do not bear that burden alone. The American people stand with you, and we always will. We stand with you today here and in memorial services in cities and towns all across America. We stand with you in quiet moments of reflection at bedsides and around kitchen tables, and in humble rituals of recollection and honor that will take place across the nation today. We all remember where we were on this day 17 years ago. Many Americans were busy getting ready for the day ahead. Some were already at work, and some were coming home after finishing a 3rd shift. Others were in the car on a morning commute. My wife drove our 3 children to elementary school on the highway right nearby these grounds, just a little more than an hour before the attack. As a new member of Congress, I was going about my normal workday routine just across the river on Capitol Hill when I learned of the attacks in New York City. But I'll never forget the moment standing in my office when I heard a staffer shout, "The Pentagon's been hit." When I made my way out of the building and walked onto the Capitol grounds, I'll never forget the sight of seeing columns of mud, brown, and black smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. literally darkening half of that crystal clear blue sky. Now, while many of us remember that day like it was yesterday, a growing number of Americans have no living memory of what happened here. Roughly 1/4 of our people were born after September the 11th, 2001. So we gather here today to reflect on what we remember, to remember the fallen, their families, and the heroes that day. But be assured, we also gather here to ensure that each succeeding generation knows the story of what happened that dark day and understands why. We must learn the lessons of 9/11 and remain ever vigilant in the defense of our nation and our people. The terrorists who carried out these attacks sought not just to take the lives of our people and crumble buildings, they hoped to break our spirit. And they failed. The American people showed on that day and every day since, we will not be intimidated. Our spirit cannot be broken. In the moments after the attack at this very place, the character, the resilience, and the courage of the people here shone forth in stories of heroism. The selfless acts of courage that took place defined the day. There was no time to organize a formal rescue operation, so as the fire spread, countless men and women who had evacuated the Pentagon just moments before plunged back in, risking their lives to save the wounded and help those who were trapped in the debris. These heroes saved countless lives. Nearly all the survivors who were recovered from the rubble that day were rescued within the first 30 minutes after the attack. And even in the midst of the attack on this department, the men and women of the Pentagon maintained continuity of operations of America's armed forces spread across the globe. It was a testament to their courage, their resilience. It was the Pentagon's finest hour. In the days and weeks that followed, the search and recovery efforts continued. I witnessed it firsthand when I came here to these grounds on September 12th, 2001. I saw the enormous black gash in the side of this edifice of our national defense. I saw the rescue and recovery personnel working diligently through the debris. I'll never forget what I saw that day. I saw heroism. I saw strength. There were firefighters, nurses, members of our armed forces, law enforcement. There were volunteers and Pentagon personnel, all working together in the hopes that there might be more to rescue in the work to recover and to begin to rebuild, not just this building, but to rebuild and re-strengthen our nation. And as they worked, just as it does today, our flag was still there. The stars and stripes were hung spontaneously from this west wall. as a sign of America's strength and our commitment to freedom. We honor the fallen by remembering them. But as Secretary Mattis said, we also honor them by ensuring that we do everything in our power as a nation to prevent the evil of radical Islamic terrorism from ever reaching our shores again. Even before the smoke cleared and the fires had put out, Americans began to answer the call to step forward to serve this nation. And they did so by the millions. The lines outside recruiting stations across this country reached around the block in big cities and small towns. It's amazing to think. In the 17 years since that day, nearly 5.5 million Americans volunteered to serve in the armed forces of the United States. Those courageous men and women turned a day of tragedy into a triumph of freedom. As a nation, by their courage, we rallied together to meet the enemy on our terms, on their soil. Because of these heroes, for 17 years, because of the extraordinary work of law enforcement all across this country, there's not been another major terrorist attack on American soil. Today we remember the service and we remember the sacrifice of those who answered the call. And on this day, on 9/11, we also remember the nearly 7,000 Americans who've given their lives on the field of battle since September the 11th. We honor them and those who were lost on this day also by supporting the men and women who serve in our armed forces today. And under our administration, I'm proud to say that we're making the strongest military in the history of the world stronger still. Last year, President Trump signed the largest increase in our national defense in a generation. And with that renewed support, we're giving our men and women in uniform and their commanding officers the resources and rules of engagement they need to fight and win where the perpetrators of this attack found safe haven. It's also important to recall that the terrorists of 9/11 inspired new enemies to spread violence and their genocidal ideology across the wider world. Today, every American should be proud that thanks to the courage of our armed forces and the leadership of our commander-in-chief, ISIS is on the run. Their caliphate has crumbled, and we will soon drive ISIS from the face of the earth. The evil that descended on America 17 years ago still lingers in our world. So to any who would wish us harm, let them know this. As the American people have shown every day since that bright September morning. As President Trump said on these grounds 1 year ago, in his words, we overcome every challenge. We triumph over every evil. And we remain united as one nation under God. Max Belkey grew up in a big family on a small farm in Minnesota. He was drafted out of high school into the United States Army and served for 2 years on the Korean Peninsula. Like so many veterans of the Korean War, he re-enlisted after the conflict ended. And more than 15 years later, he took up the cause of liberty fighting in the jungles of Vietnam. On March 29, 1973, Master Sergeant Max Belkey became the last American combat soldier to leave Saigon. On September 11, 2001, Master Sergeant Belkey was among the first to be declared lost here at the Pentagon. Today, on this September 11th, we mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. But we do not grieve like those who have no hope, because heroes give us hope. Today we remember our beloved fallen, whose names are enshrined at this memorial and will forever be etched in the hearts of the American people for as long as this nation endures. Today we remember the families of those we lost, who endured this tragedy with strength and courage. And today we remember the brave men and women who responded here and in New York City and in the air over Pennsylvania and on fields of battle in the 17 years since, who considered our lives more important than their own. And today, we breathe a prayer for all of them and all of you. A prayer that I'm told that Master Sergeant Belkey recited every time he spoke to veterans in gatherings large and small across this country. He would always end with the same words, and so I end. To you who are gathered here and have suffered this loss, to those we remember who look down from glory, and to those who fight and stand for our freedom this very hour. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. We claim this ground in remembrance of September 11th, 2001. We honor the 184 people whose lives were lost, their families, and all who sacrificed, that we may live in freedom. May God bless them. May God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's observance. Thank you for joining us this morning. Please remain in place for the departure of today's official party.